everything under the sun for cannabis extractors and the manufacturing sector. So today we are joined by some amazing, wonderful people from all over the United States. Some you know, some you don't. And we are going to go ahead and download you on what's happening in the LP world with regards to solvents for extractions. So we're going through a couple things here, guys, so bear with me, but I'm Saman Razani. I am your host. I am also the Terp Genie, but everyone's a genie here because we all win at the end of the day. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for your time. As we adjust, bear with us, but we do want to have give a chance to all of our participants to give a little bit of information about themselves. And we will do that in just a couple minutes here. Thank you so much. Okay. Right. So Murphy, we still got you. If you're going to come on, Murph, come on so that we can adjust. Kyle, thanks for jumping back. All right. So happy Tuesday, everybody. We are here. This has been about 20-ish months, give or take, since our last panel discussion regarding solvents and the oil and gas industry and specialty gas industry as it relates to the cannabis sector. So we're here to kind of find out what's been happening. We know that there's been a lot of conversation happening around this specific topic of contamination in butane specifically, but we definitely have a lot more information to download everybody on, and we definitely have gained some ground when as it relates to coming up with standards for these gases and these contaminants. And I think it's going to be a really great conversation. It's also going to be two parts. So I want to prepare everybody. We had so much information, so much data that we had to collect that we just didn't have enough time. And we wanted to get this information out sooner than later. And we have one of the esteemed gentlemen here with us today who is the lab director of the lab that's doing the testing. So we will have another part to this. Probably mid-June, but we'll update everybody on an exact date and time as the week goes on. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce some of our panelists here, and I will would love for each of you to kind of give a short sentence or two about you, your company, your experience in the business. So let's start with Brad Hicks, since you're at my top left. Brad Hicks, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am in the testing world, in oil and gas testing. We're a global company, and we usually test downstream, upstream, whatever it is, whatever you need.
That's excellent. Excellent. And is it specific to oil and gas, or you guys do any other testing?
Actually, we do a lot of other testing. We do electronics, consumer goods, pretty much anything and everything.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. We have a newcomer here, Mr. Jim Avolt. Hi, Jim.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
I'm in the process of renting a vehicle. I just landed in Denver a little bit ago. So I'll come back to this call after everyone gets done with their intro, when I'll be sitting in the vehicle. I'm the director of a company in Toledo area, Quality Extraction Group. We test and bulk fill hydrocarbons for the extraction industry. I've been in the specialty gas industry for a little over 30 years now, only dealing with research grade high purity products. And I'm part of the ASTM committee that is setting the specification for hydrocarbon based on purities, impurities, and contaminants. And I sent out some information earlier, and I imagine we'll get into depth with that as time allows after the intro.
Yes, we definitely will, Jim. Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that, Jim. We're happy to have you. Thanks for reaching out to us. Mr. Kyle Hernandez. Kyle, everybody knows you, man, but for the people that don't, tell them.
My name is Kyle. I work with Solvent Direct. We specialize in the distribution of these LPGs that we're discussing today. doing final mile delivery right to the end user's door. I spent the last decade working with Busy Bee extractors, selling equipment, training teams, and setting up labs across the country. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. We're super happy to have you. Kyle represents Solvent Direct, and Solvent Direct has been around for a very long time in the business, and we have all at one point in time or another have had the luxury of having their services. So thanks a lot, Kyle. Thanks a lot for the Solvent Direct team. Mr. Matt Wagner of Blue Leaf Gas. Matt, how you doing? Give us a little bit of information about you, because you're kind of the new guy here per se. So talk to us.
I'm new. Our company's new. So I'm the co-founder and the CTO of Blue Leaf. And we supply super high purity, super clean hydrocarbons specifically designed for the extraction industry. And where we really come from, so I'm a PhD chemical engineer. I'm an R&D guy. I've spent 30 some years developing, commercializing new chemical processes and equipment and chemicals and stuff. But in particular, probably about half of that time, so I did a bunch of different applications, but about half of my time was spent making really, really super clean, super pure gases to go into the semiconductor industry. So stuff that's, I know we're talking about setting up clean specs here. I mean, way beyond what even we're talking about here. 9/9's purity on moisture, on particles, all that sort of stuff. And so just the way we got into it is, we have this kind of background of how to make super clean, super, pure gases. And we heard that people have to pre-distill. We heard that this was dirty gas. And to us, me and my partner, the idea that, and this is meant to be no offense, this is coming from our perspective, supplying people like TSMC and Intel, that it made no sense to us that a gas supplier would ever supply a product to someone that wasn't ready to use it. That person then had to clean it to use it. If I asked Intel to do that, they'd throw me out the door. So we're like, there must be a way to do this. There should be a way to do this. So, that's how we got involved in it. And I'm really excited to be part of this and meet all you guys. And it's a really interesting area. Exciting.
We're definitely happy to have you and happy to have your insight, and someone that could lend some insight to that distillation right next door to you, Mr. Tyler Felino Graham, Sir Dabslot 710 on IG. Tyler's been a dear colleague to us. He's done a lot of testing, a lot of sampling, a lot of data collection, a lot of sample collection, and has done this all on his own merit because he just wants to raise the standard, as we all do. So kudos to Tyler. Big shout out to him. And Tyler is definitely in the trenches per se. So if anyone could give us some good insights, it's Tyler. Tyler, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself for the ones that have never seen or heard from you before.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. As you said, my name's Tyler Felino Graham, or Sir Dabslot on Instagram. And I have worked at Denver Dabco, one of the local companies in Colorado, for going on 7 years now. And started in the industry as soon as I was able to get my badge, and have been in it since. And my favorite thing is just discovering new techs and doing research, and like Saman said, going for the purest gas we possibly can. So I was able to provide a few samples of some impurities that we're dealing with in our solvent supply currently. So, yeah.
Yes, and Mr. Brad Hicks has been the lucky recipient of those samples, so he's going to speak to those a little later, and we have a couple images of those, but lots to discuss around that. So Tyler, thank you for your effort and for your work. It's super appreciated, and it's going to help to drive that standard and to raise us all to the next level. Murphy, if you're prepared to give a little intro about yourself. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Murphy, for everybody.
I just want to shout out Tyler for admitting to being the emitter of the impurities real quick, because y'all, the problem is not that we don't know there's a problem. The problem is that no one wants to, say their name when they participate. So huge value. I've been in the industry since the dog track days of applying for your occupational license. If you know, you know. And I've worked with almost every single closed loop out there in a lot of different labs. So I've got a ton of experience with the hardware, but I think I'm most well known for being a professional complainer, and I hope to contribute to this conversation in that capacity.
What a place to have you for Miss Complainer. No, I'm kidding. No, it's you're absolutely right. If you're not willing to expose the issues, then they're never going to be fixed. And we're all in the mud together, regardless if you hide behind a rock or under it or near it. It's we're still in the mud together. We're all just here, and if we're not trying to help ourselves, someone's going to fix it for us, and we know who that's going to be. It's probably going to be the government, and that's never going to turn out well. So in our efforts to figure out our own shit and to move forward collectively, this is why we've all gathered here today, and under the auspice of science and figuring out a conclusion or some conclusive evidence of what we're dealing with exactly has been the problem and is still the problem. And I think that's part of what drives everyone a little crazy, and why we have to reach out to so many different analytical chemists and companies that could potentially tell us what's happening here. And there's so many other issues with regards to these samples and these contaminants that we will definitely get into and broach today. I mean, look, there's so many places to start. We've covered down on so much of this in the prior conversation. However, the only real conclusion there was that there was not enough evidence, and there was not a standard, and there was still the problems that were going to persist. I know that a lot of our solvent suppliers, distributors, manufacturers are now working together at a more transparent level, helping each other, and also trying to fix or mitigate rather the problems that persist for operators. But where are we with solving those problems, and where are we on a consensus on what the problem actually is? So I'm going to throw this question to Kyle, Matt, Jim, and Brad first. What's the consensus, Kyle, right now from your work in the field? What is the biggest challenge and the biggest problem we're facing with our gas supply?
I would say touch points, right? The amount of uncontrolled touch points across the board invite impurities and contaminants to be in the end users' cylinders, right? At the end of the day, no matter where the gas originated from, it really is dependent on what truck it traveled in to get to the next bulk facility, what kind of lubricants and contaminants are the gas is being introduced to at that bulk facility, and then cylinder, what impurities are in that cylinder, what standard is there for resetting a cylinder. It varies at every touch point and every bulk facility that you go to. So there are a lot of factors just outside of the manufacturing pipeline. It goes all the way to the distribution level of cylinders that creates the challenge of staying on top of the spec of gas.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was, eloquently put. I guess I was more looking for is there a specific contaminant that is giving everyone the most problems? But you're absolutely right to pose that as an issue. It's definitely an issue. It's the only place that these contaminations can really come from. So, but is there a specific contaminant? Is it a paraffin oil? Is it an epoxidized soybean oil? Is it something crazy that we don't know about? Is that the issue, or are we still searching for the issue?
I think last year, benzene was a huge point of focus for everybody. There was a lot of benzene contamination issues countrywide from coast to coast. When I first joined Solvent Direct, that's kind of what I fell into, was kind of the tail end of people experiencing benzene in their finished extracts. There was a lot of kind of ideas being thrown around as to how the benzene got into the extract in the first place. Something I saw was a lot of gas suppliers trying to put the blame back on the end users. And maybe it's something in the terpenes that they're adding, or maybe it's a contamination in their process. It was pretty apparent to have lots of people across the country at the same time, that it didn't traditionally happen in the past. So it kind of led me to believe that it was something in the supply chain. That was a big focus, and that's kind of the direction that ASTM has been really, or the subcommittee on LPGs has really been focused on. Fast crash is also another issue that causes problems for operators. Typically, most operators have found workarounds in post-processing to manipulate the finished product to get it to be the consistency that they want. But where it becomes an issue is when it starts clogging up internally in the process, right? And it pauses production for end users. And that's typically when they raise alarms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tyler, I really appreciate it. And it just drives me, like, again, this goes back to, my experience, my background, but that's just insane, right? That gas suppliers and everyone who's involved in this gas chain will eventually supply with something that screws up the process. I mean, that's not what as a gas supplier, that's just not what you should do, right? You shouldn't force the extractors to have to play games at the end to manage bad gas. It's kind of like an entropy argument, but it's really a heuristic. I mean, I can make it really technical, but basically almost for pretty much all the time, the best way to purify something, to clean something, to control something, you always want to do it as upstream as possible. It's always just cheaper from an energy perspective. It's more effective. Again, it's like you get into the details, it's an entropy thing, but you want to be upstream. So the worst way to handle the problem is to handle it in this post-processing thing, is for these extractors to handle the post-processing thing. So that's the thing. They shouldn't have to do that.
No, I like that explanation, but it seems to me that, like, if it's a benzene contamination and all these users are seeing it, it's coming from a source, right? Sure. So that, I mean, I'm not an expert. You guys are the experts, so please educate me. But it seems like if everyone is seeing something happening, that means that whoever was supplying that spec gas in that much bulk would be potentially the culprit, because I can only imagine that, like, there's the supply chain looks like one large funnel into many different smaller funnels, and so how does everyone in that supply chain have the same issue?
I'm just hesitant when you use words like culprit, right? And I mean, because it has like this negative connotation to it, and I don't want, because I think that people who are involved in hydro, my competitors, right, and the people that they buy from and all of that, is I don't think they're hiding something or they're It's just the and this maybe gets into a little bit with Taylor's comment about, more broadly, is there just is not a spec gas supply chain to extractors. It just doesn't exist. So yeah, they're a culprit, but it's kind of like you go to somebody and you ask somebody, oh, you got to do all this clean stuff and special stuff, and you can only use certain tankers and do all that. And they're like, 95% of my stuff is going and I'm burning to make some heat at some farm someplace or whatever, or it's going into a butadiene reactor or something, right? And so they just don't think about it, and it's just not important to them, right? So the root cause, it's not just like there's one specific contaminant and there's one, company who's screwing up and getting that contaminant. It's just that whole supply chain is simply not designed. It was never intended to be designed for extraction because of the problems that extractors have, right?
Right. Which is exactly what's concerning. But continue, please.
Because culprits makes it personal.
I'll just say to that point, this is really new, right? A relatively new application for butane in liquid phase, right? Where, like you said, most end users of high purity butane are using it in vapor form. So we're encountering new challenges that didn't really exist previously.
Right.
And And the industry that we're in is a very volatile industry, right? Where at the beginning, a lot of people were making money, a lot of people jumped in, and now, just like any other commodity, it's a race to the bottom, and people are trying to control their cost of goods. So I think, in a broad stroke kind of approach to this is, does the supply chain to make the gas more pure, or are end users going to be adapting filtration to control the inputs for their process, right?
Sounds
And
expensive.
So does 999's purity. That sounds
Well,
expensive.
but is
also,
the 99s actually telling you that your gas supply is actually clean? Because I think we've all determined that
Another
the
point. It's not
purity
clean.
actually doesn't tell you necessarily if the tank has particulate contaminants and other potential mystery oil contaminations and stuff, because it's all in solution until that tank gets closer to empty and then it's deposited. And so, yeah, purity. Look, that is the debate, right? And so, Jim, I want to jump to you, Jim, because you have some kind of standard thresholds that you're proposing for the contaminants. So that's a good step, right? So we're gonna say, hey, the contaminants, whether they're there or not, they can't be above this level. So that's a start. And speak about that a little bit, Jim, about these thresholds. Where did you come up with these numbers? And I can potentially just share like a screenshot of the info you sent, Jim, if you want. But essentially, I could read off to. Let's see here. Let me capture this message.
Let me address something. Let me address something here. Is that there is, as the industry, as producers that were used to making money hand over fist, have now come into tough times, and it's happening in every state. Cali, probably the worst. Everyone's looking to
10 years ago.
Everyone is looking to cut corners when they can, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Sorry, it sounded that way. Everyone's looking not to piss away money.
Yes.
So the search goes on for the least expensive solvent, and that puts a lot of pressure on everybody, from the manufacturer to the fill plants that we run. We have one fill plant, to the fill plant that we run, to the distributors that we have. Everyone's looking to save money wherever they can. And through that process, the focus, in my mind, has gone away from ensuring the quality of the gas, more on, well, I can buy this for $190 a cylinder. What can you do for me today? And that's not the kind of business that we want to have. But that's the way it is out. And Cali, like I said, is the worst market. So there's a lot of pressure to go in other directions too.
Well, there's definitely a lot of competition in California. It's true. And so, but to kind of like propose this bifurcation of purity and cleanliness, because there is definitely a difference. And frankly, I feel like the high purity gas being such a high price is almost a little, it's like it's like a little bit of a game, right? It's like, hey, we got the pure stuff, so if you want it, but as buyers, as users, and as the end user of the product, we're not using it in even close to the same application as whoever's buying that research grade product, and they're never gonna use it like we're using it. That's for sure. So it begs the question, like, how do we get away from a purity standard that doesn't mean that our gas for our application is clean?
Well, I'm part of the ASTM subcommittee that's putting together the specifications for LPG gases that are being used for botanical extraction.
Yes.
And even though it hasn't been finalized yet, the basics of contaminants and purities are pretty much set in stone. Now, I shared that earlier.
but how did you come up with these values and why? And is this used from another part of the oil and gas industry that we're adapting to this specific usage?
No, this was put together by the group that got involved with ASTM, and that's the only reason I joined ASTM was this purpose. They're made up of extractors, of wholesalers, production facilities. Diversified as a member. Rami Rodriguez, when he was running this place down there, it's Cortera Gas, and he still might be running it. He was a member. Solvent Direct is involved in it.
But Jim, so the question, because all those people are literally in this thread that's in this panel, for sure, 100%. But how are we coming up with these values? That's the question specifically. How, and Brad, maybe you want to jump in here and talk about how these. Go ahead.
I think it's really, really important point, because you're starting to talk about numbers. Is for someone, I spent a lot of time working on, doing what Jim's doing standard development and stuff like that, and on for stuff that I was selling to semiconductors. Is what there's a tension, right? Because the first thing you need to do, and this is not the tension part, but between the people who are the solvent experts and for the people who are the botanical extraction experts, you say, hey, these are the key impurities or of interest, right? These are the things that I want to measure, right? That actually takes some work, and you can get it wrong, and you have to, it's an evergreen thing where you kind of tweak that thing. That's not that hard. Then you say, okay, you have to test for it. Do we have tests? And you go to someone like Brad, and a lot of the stuff are really good standardized test methods to test for all of those things. But the number is it, and getting to that point, just getting to the point to say, here are the key impurities and they should be tested. That's kind of like 85% of the way there, right? The next part, which is actually really hard, is to figure out where should that level be, right? So as an extractor, you say, oh, it should be 0 or 1 ppb or level of detection. Your gas is going to be ridiculously expensive. So we need part of it is we need data to say, what chemicals do we need to measure? Then it's going to be an ongoing work in progress to figure out what level should those numbers be. And, so saying what number is a tough question.
Look, and I'm not, and this isn't just specific to this problem. Look, this is in the cannabis industry in general. We have this issue where I feel, this is me talking personally, there is no general consensus, but I feel like we're all in consensus. The thresholds that we have on all of the testing for the compliance of the products, right? Whether it's residual solvents, probably the biggest one, because there is absolutely no uniformity. In some places in the country, it's like in single digit ppm. In other places in the country, it's like 5,000 ppm. So it's like that, who's making the rules and why is always my question. And that's what I want to elucidate is like, look, okay, cool. We have a group of professionals from, it's partisan, it's partly industry from oil and gas, it's partly industry from cannabis, maybe some other industries. It's great. That's wonderful. Of course, there's got to be some general consensus at that level that these contaminants exist and they should be monitored, and we should not allow specialty gas that does not meet spec to go to extraction, to the extraction sector specifically for cannabis extraction. So who's making the determination, and what's the reasoning behind it? And I know what you're saying, Matt. It's hard to come up with the numbers, but that's my point. There's numbers.
It's a subtle point. Sorry to talk over you, but it's a subtle point, but it's an important point. And especially I think for a lot of folks here who are new to standards development, what you just said is wrong. If you don't meet the standard, you can't sell butane, or you can't sell. It's not what it is. Because someone can make it, some guy doesn't care about how crappy the butane is, can sell that. But what the standard says, it says, hey, if you want to be looked at as a quality producer, here the standard you have to. But there's not an enforcement mechanism. The enforcement mechanism is people doing the right thing, because the thing is, you talk about Jim mentioned it's all about saving money now and all that sort of stuff, and it's obvious. It's just so obvious. It's hard to get your
Right.
pencil right. But having clean butane at the beginning at a reasonable price, but having clean LPG at the beginning, you will be more efficient. You will save money. That is the low cost option, right? But people don't. So maybe that's the other big problem. Like I said, you know, there's really no infrastructure for botanical grade stuff. And second, the users don't really understand that they'll save money, they'll make better product, they won't get sued for hurting somebody and all that, right? If they have, and so the smart money thing, not just, oh, I want to make a quality product, my stuff is medicine and all that, which is very, very important, but just on a straight money thing, paying a little bit more for a higher quality product is going to save you money. Now,
I understand that. I just my questioning specifically is rooted in this. At some point, there was a benzene contamination in someone's gas. There was probably a BTEX analysis done on that gas before it went to the customer, and it said it was fine. But lo and behold, the end user has a benzene contamination. So, you know, like,
Well, we only had one customer goes, and we were going to this end user through a reseller that was willing to pay to have every cylinder tested for BTEX after it's filled. That's the only way. That's the only way to absolutely guarantee the quality of the product that an individual extractor is going to use. But it's cost prohibitive. Nobody wants to pay it.
Yeah,
sure. And batch testing currently is what? Like, what size volume are we talking?
This customer was using maybe a pallet a week, maybe some weeks a dozen 120-pound cylinders of butane. So
is there any uniformity with a volume size batch testing? Like every 1,000 gallons, you got to get it tested, or is there anything like that?
It still depends on the condition of and what was in the tank that gets dropped off at the customers. The only way to absolutely guarantee it's good gas is to sniff it after it's filled.
Okay.
And that's just way too expensive. That won't work. So the next best thing then is setting standards for the manufacturers. And heck, I put together a little sampling kit using brand new cylinders like Burns-O-Matic propane things. Mm-hmm. Sending them out to customers. Okay, put your butane in this or your blend, whatever. Send it on back to us. We'll analyze it. We won't tell anybody what's in there but you. And then you can do what you want with it. And I guess I threw this up on F4200 and exactly 2 extractors. Said, okay, send me the kit. 2 out of, I don't know how many are there.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean, again, you know, it's, there's the business, there's the industry, and there's business owners. And I think we all know that the operators are probably keen on it, and it's just some people give up because they don't think it's worth fighting the battle at their managerial level. So it's understood, but of course that's even more of the reason why we have to be good stewards of this whole entire process for everyone else. And you know, it's wonderful that everyone's like coming together to try to sort this out and to discuss it. Brad, you've been quiet up there. I really want to hear from you on that because you see so much more than we do, and you analyze it. So you're looking through a lens of sensitivity that none of us have. Please enlighten us a little bit on all this.
Yeah, I mean, that's no problem at all. Like you said, we test butane, propane, all the different LPGs in our lab on a daily basis. And, you know, whenever I hear all of y'all talking about specs, you have to remember that butane does meet a spec, GPA 2140. That's like the basic spec that it meets, but that spec may not be suitable for your use. So we have to figure out what issues you're having, what is causing those issues. That way they can be addressed properly. And, you know, I've been hearing y'all talk about a bunch. My big question is, I guess everybody is having the same issue, the residual issue. Has there ever been any type of gas that you purchased where you didn't experience that issue? That would be one of my questions, just to find out if it if there is gas out there.
Some of these operators going through so much gas that I don't even know if it's possible for someone to pinpoint, and that's kind of a big issue if a supplier isn't necessarily, like, let's say they're going and getting their gas from a welding supply store. Now, maybe 100% of those, and again, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, please. Not always is it that 100% of those tanks are from one distributor, manufacturer, whatever. Maybe there's a coalescence of some different tanks from some other manufacturers, distributors, which could be the same grade, could be a little different. I think we all know that not all butane is created equally, and there's a big difference on where it comes from in the supply chain and in the manufacturing and refinement stages of that process. So, it's like, let's say I go in there and I'm buying a tank a day, let's just say for argument's purposes, and the supplier goes through one pallet and then the next pallet's a different supplier, and I get that gas, and now I'm potentially seeing some different results, and maybe that's cross-contaminating in my system, and I lose my control. So it's like these are the real problems that I see, and we pose this in a kind of an infograph, and I know that it might be that was how it was maybe 24 months ago, and maybe now we have a different system to prevent or to mitigate any cross-contamination, but it's not perfect. And so I know it's not perfect. I think we all know it's not perfect. And the question is, like, from an operator standpoint, Tyler, you're an operator, distilling your gas takes time, right? How much time would you say that chews up? Or do you have to basically kind of do that and then do something else simultaneously, or else you lose a whole day of operations?
Yeah, so prior to what we've done recently, we were having to stop systems to distill butane, and you have to basically do a system reset each time in order to be sure that you're not contaminating any of that mystery oil that you pulled out into your product, since you're using the same vessels. We ended up actually buying a third closed loop system just to be able to distill while doing our current workload. So it caused enough problem for us to actually go out and buy a whole nother system solely for it, so that we could focus on our other two machines.
Right. And what's like your average daily? Oh, well, I guess so you're doing it simultaneously. So how long does it take you to distill 120 pounds of butane?
Usually, with the system we have set up, which is very basic, we're using ice water on our condensing coil. So there's not sufficient chilling or heating necessarily. But it'll take us at least a full day to do 120 pounds of solvent.
So it's like a small setup. It's not like a large, like a large.
Yeah, it's a PX1 from Precision that we fitted to be our distillation.
What did you spend on that, if you mind me asking?
We bought it secondhand, so we got kind of a deal. But we spent $4,000 on the system, so we got quite a deal, but still took us a whole day of fitting it into our C1V1 and cleaning it, because it came from someone off of Craigslist. So
sure. They got lucky, right? But also it's like you that's a small system. So 4K, let's just say that's the bottom of the options for an operator. And I'm sure that someone could develop something, but stainless steel that can hold pressure costs a lot of money. And we all know that. So it's like, that sucks. That sucks for operators. Also, the other option, Murphy, maybe you can chime in here. You run Tyler, you too, you probably run over media as well as still distill, or maybe you run your vapor through the media. And that's an additional cost, right? So it's like, you're not necessarily saving money by getting a lower quality gas, like Matt was saying. So so I guess, Murphy, if you want to chime in, how much are you spending on your media combo to clean your gas?
So it depends. Like a lot of people have brought up already, the inconsistencies in the supply chain, which is not insignificant. But from a GMP perspective, you are obligated to validate your own everything. And so, part of that validation process could be finding a supplier that does a perfect job. That'd be great. An alternative to finding a perfect supplier that does a perfect job and paying the perfect extra price for that would be putting the time and energy into the remediation of the other compromise that you made. So, when we talk about all of the issues and the inconsistencies, all of them go right back to good manufacturing practices. Yes, there's a standard that could be applied to the gas. And yes, that standard, if it were to be more stringent, comes with a fee. And that's fair. If as operators, if we want our time and effort from distilling that gas and cleaning it up after receiving it to be respected, we've got to consider the fact that that work is also being done by someone else if it isn't done by us. Somebody has to distill the gas. And so for me, the question is, do I spread out that $4,000 on an incredible deal on a used system and squeeze it into my processing room and lose efficiency per square foot in my valuable C1D1 space, and then dedicate time and labor and consumables? Or do I pay 200 more per cylinder plus the cost of the test? There's a lot of ways we could approach it. What I always look at is what are the compromises I can make? And unfortunately for the cannabis industry, the compromises you're willing to make on a daily basis change, because in one market you may have a different set of requirements that you need to meet. If you're in Oregon and you can have 5,000 ppm in your residual solvent in your product, then the same purity of gas that's being sold in Massachusetts, where you can only have 10 ppm, may fail in Oregon and pass in Massachusetts, because the extra effort to remove the solvent from your product removes all those solvents, including the benzene. And if you leave a bunch of it behind, then, ppms add up. Percentage by weight and ppms don't translate perfectly. There's a lot of opportunities for contamination, and, you've got to look at what you're balancing, So for me, I don't consider it a huge investment for me to purify gas when I know I'm getting a really good price on that gas. And I would also similarly expect that if I'm paying extra, someone else better have worked just as hard as I did to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to speak on there. Brad, do you have anything to chime in and comment?
No, I mean, I think she's absolutely right. I mean, in the business itself, you have to find out what's the price point, right? Well, what price am I willing to pay for somebody to already do the work for me? How much time does it save? Is it really worth it? You guys know the business better than I do, and so that would be maybe per user. It could be totally different for each user, but I agree. There could be tested to specs, but is it really addressing the issue? Right? Are you going to be able to pay extra for this? Are you still going to have the issues? That'll be the big question.
Let's talk about that real quick, because Tyler sent some samples that I picked up, and I mailed them to you, and you got those samples, and we have some pictures.
Yes.
Adam, what do you want me to do here? Do you want me to share my screen to show this? How should I do this? Oh, Adam might be away from his computer. Let me see if I can just share my screen. Oh, cool. I have something. Do you want me just to email it to you? Okay. Good. Thanks. That's our producer, Adam, who's helpful, so helpful with everything we need technologically. Okay, so let's see. So this is, let me see if I could zoom in here and make this tighter, guys. One sec here. Okay, how's that? Can we see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I will. So it's not coming up in our live. So is that it's so great. All right, wonderful. Give us just 1 sec. We'll get this viewing for everybody, but our panelists can see here. So give me a sec. It's kind of going to be like lackluster without us showing people what it is. Excuse us, guys, for the technical difficulties in this moment. Okay. JPEG or PNG, Adam? Okay. All right. So the question I was getting to was that we sent some samples in and they had obvious particulate contamination. Now,
Yes.
that is like, I guess this is the definitive point, right? That like this particulate won't come out of a vapor stream, won't come out of a vapor port on, on a tank. So the only way it's coming out is through the dip tube, and the only like I remember I'm old enough in this game, I guess, to say that I remember when tanks did not have dip tubes and we had to call every manufacturer or every supplier and say, hey, we need a dip tube on this thing because we need the liquid. So this was, 2013. So over a decade ago, we had to kind of adjust and kind of everyone else in the supply chain had to adjust for us as well because we had this need. Now, not saying that there was no dip tubes, but saying that the vast majority of the tanks that we were getting would actually not have them. And we were at that point, I think I want to say it's sad Jeff Frick's not here. We were getting our gas from Jeff Frick at General Air in Denver, and we had to continuously swap out tanks with them. So this is I think Murphy as well as myself, this is our biggest concern because the particulate is actually part of the contamination and part of the contamination that's very hard to test because now it's another part of the matrix that has that reacts completely differently, but it's still part of the contamination stream. So Brad, when you see something like this, I know that we've been texting back and forth and you were asking me some questions specific to the process, to the pressures, to the temperatures. When you see this level of contaminant, particulate contaminant, what's your first impression and how do you tackle something like this?
Yeah, as far as the particulates, like we text back and forth, it makes it very difficult to perform testing on that, right? And whenever you're looking at particulates and butane, it's you have to remember that some of this butane is passing through pipes, mild steel pipes, maybe going into short tanks made of mild steel. So those types of things are going to be picked up over time. So it's not unusual to see, I guess you would say, particulates in LPG products, but you don't see it to that extreme, I guess you would say. And when we are texting back and forth, I asked you about the process, see where this product is coming out. And whenever you're taking the liquid butane and then you're basically changing the chemical composition by heating it up, pressurizing it, and then something is falling out, right? This substance is falling out, allowing the butane to vaporize, I guess. It can't hold it in the vapors. So it's a heavier component that is falling out and being captured. And that's what we're dealing with. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. Tyler, talk a little bit about the sample because this was your sample. So from my understanding, when you distill your gas, you're distilling and you're still sending that whole entire stream through media, and then you're doing your evap and your collection / wipeout. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we we pass it as a liquid over a molecular sieve and we use activated alumina, and that was mainly due to people posting that possibly might be a cure for the fast crashing and stuff like that. So we pass it over that as a liquid, and then like you guys were saying, it goes into a heat basin and we boil it off, and it goes over more molecular sieve as a vapor, and then we recover it into our storage tank, which is a stainless steel recovery vessel. And this stuff is still what came out after passing through the media, and then after boiling off everything that we could boil off, this is what I was able to pour out.
And what
Yes.
temperature, Tyler, did you have your thing set at? I've heard 35,
So
40.
it's at 45 Celsius,
Okay.
but it's also tied into a second system. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's 100% running 45C the entire time. I definitely think it dips in temperature throughout the process, but that's what we have our circulating heaters set to.
Yeah, and that's
Gotcha.
what we were talking about, Brad. The Delta T is definitely, and if you're daisy chaining it, for sure. I mean, I don't think that's cut in half, but I think it's reducing it significantly. But
Yeah.
I think, to my surprise, that like that's what's left after it goes through an absorption process. That's scary. I kind of don't know. I haven't seen as much as Tyler sees. I'm an operator, OG operator, but I haven't been in the lab for quite some time. So, seeing what's happening at this stage in the game is it's a little concerning. It's something that we want to address, and we definitely don't want to see stuff like that, that bad come out of these tanks, especially after a distillation and some chromatography. So and Murphy, I don't know if you're able to see that contamination on the screen or not. But that's what we sent in, Murphy. And I know that your process is similar. I know that you use some media to also help in your process of distilling and cleaning up the gas for your input. Is there anything else that you've seen, Murphy, that is like pretty alarming or disturbing even after your distillation process?
Yeah, the extraction process is gross, my dude. So a lot of the media that I use is actually to clean the gas after we touched it. I'm actually worried about the, passive amount of moisture, atmosphere, whatever came with the nitrogen tanks. You want to talk about a standard? Those nitrogen tanks have a standard of nothing, of $100 is what that standard is. So,
Wow.
when I'm cleaning it as much for my interaction with it as my expectation of the manufacturer. And I think one of the things that's most concerning to me, because I go out and consult, so I see the bottom of everybody's tanks, and I see ice in the bottom of these chilled tanks everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere. And everybody has a stick with a towel on it that they use to clean their tank when it gets so bad or they finally fail a test. So, back to my GMP comment earlier, it's wildly inappropriate to mix batches of solvent. That's not GMP anywhere at any time. However, nobody wants to take the time to fully reset their system, but that is the GMP standard. The GMP standard batches in every sense of that term. And so, what I look at is just an absolute lack of that. It is treated like a Brita water filter sometimes, where people just keep adding in and then never change out anything, including the old dirty gas. So seeing that water at the bottom of these systems, knowing, when we just now we're talking about, how that particulate comes out of the product, you're diluting your butane when you hit that tank with nitrogen. And if you don't get all that nitrogen back out, stuff's gonna crash out. When we get all that water in the system, stuff is gonna crash out. Our chemical purity does change after we touch it. And that's equally concerning. Unfortunately, we don't have the level of accuracy in cannabis testing to be able to see as small quantities as the gas manufacturers can see. And so while on one hand, I definitely want to hold those gas manufacturers accountable, on the other hand, I can't hold myself accountable. I can't test over 1 part per million, and that's the same amount that fails. So, there's a gap in the way that we prioritize the data here, because we care a lot about this clean gas and then we don't clean the tanks we put it into.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And you're talking about the operating tank, obviously, that most operators are using. I know very few that aren't using an actual separate operating tank. And that's a whole nother issue, right? Is definitely there's some water activity that we have to be concerned with. Matt and Kyle, like from your perspective, is there any water activity that should be concerning coming from the tap, coming from the actual manufacturers themselves? Is there an alarming amount that is noticeable?
I think you're getting it so much more. I mean, it's the amount of moisture that's coming in with your LPG is trivial to the amount of moisture that's in your biomass. So, there may be a concern with, level of moisture in your LPG, depending on if you're, exposing the atmosphere a lot, like valving and devalving and stuff like that. Then you got carbon steel. If you use carbon, I don't use carbon steel cylinders, so it's not a problem for us. But if you use carbon steel and you're doing all that stuff, then you're going to get corrosion and you're going to get particles off of the cylinder, right? And even a super clean cylinder that's dry, you're still going to get particles if it's new because of welding splatter and a whole bunch of other things from a manufacturing standpoint. I guess another thing, just I was thinking about particulate. Again, I don't worry about it too much because it's easiest for us to remove it. But you think about
you're in stainless steel, Matt, or is that what you're supplying in?
Yeah, stainless steel, 304L with a 2B finish. And we do that for two main reasons. One is the cylinder itself and cylinder manufacturing is a big source of particles, again, welding splatter and all that sort of stuff, right? So not only do we use stainless steel cylinders, the parts are clean before they're assembled. I'm going to get it wrong. My partner's the welding guy. So it's TIG welded rather than MIG welded or the other way around. One of them's a lot cleaner than the other for some reason I can't remember, and all that sort of stuff. So but the other reason why we use these stainless steel cylinders, it's kind of similar reason for you guys, is it's a much less reactive surface and it's a much smoother surface. So one of the problems and one of the reasons why I think you get these you might get really clean gas and then all of a sudden it's dirty from the same supplier and all that sort of stuff is mist oil. I mean, it because from when you look at it, it sticks to the bottom of your tank. Is mist oil both and not just mist oil, but the other components like the oxygenates, the other heavy components that you care about are dissolved in the bulk, right? So you're going to get that if you take liquid butane out, that stuff is dissolved in it. You're going to take it out, but it has a big affinity to surfaces. Again, you see it sticks to surfaces, right? So if you use a stainless steel surface, it's just a lot smoother. So there's less. So it operates less as a sponge. So basically you can take a nice clean cylinder, you put really crappy butane in it. That cylinder is now really dirty, and maybe for the next 10 times you fill it, even if you have perfectly clean butane, that butane's going to be in a dirty, if it's a carbon steel cylinder, because all that contamination hangs on the walls. So, and then the other thing you got to worry about just on contamination, just even if you have super clean, no particle butane coming off of a fractionation column or whatever, which isn't true, but even if you did, you still have a problem with in butane or propane with particulate, because all that stuff is moved with rotary vane pumps or turbines, right? And they're all graphite vanes, and graphite vanes are replaceable. So it's just, they know anyone who moves, you're throwing carbon particles all the time into your butane stream. Now you can filter them out, which is what we do. But if you don't filter them out, then they get into that cylinder, and then your cylinder's full of crap. I've seen videos of cylinders that are horrific, where they have a coating of a centimeter or two of just crap, like black crap through that whole cylinder. Nobody else cares because they're just using it for barbecue or for heat, right? So they just don't see it. But for your purpose, for an extractor's purpose, it's horrible. It's crazy, right?
Let me ask you a question. How difficult is that, and how expensive is that to mitigate at the manufacturing level? Not cannabis manufacturing, gas manufacturing.
Okay, so it's not terribly expensive if you do it on just do it on the slipstream that's going to the extractors, right? So again, the way to keep it cheap and for the guys who are actually, a butane plant and NGL, natural gas liquids plant, right? Is where it's one of the places where butane comes from. About 60% of butane comes from an NGL plant, right? And if I was to ask my suppliers, you got to purify, or you got to filter all that butane and all the propane and ethane that you make, no way in hell are they going to invest that capital, right? But I can take the butane that I take off that plant and I can filter it. So I think, again, this gets back to having a spec gas supply chain for extraction. And if you do that, yes, that sliver of the LPG community that's just going to extractors, absolutely that can be filtered. And without, I mean, it's an added cost, but it's not a tremendously added cost.
But it would be a tremendous cost if you were doing everything.
If you're doing everything, I think that just, why would you do it? Because they don't need to do it for 99% of their customers don't care. So it just makes no economic sense for them. But for people who are supplying to the cannabis industry, to the extraction industry, sure, you can put it through a filter and knock out the particles. Removing the chemical stuff is a lot harder. The particulates is relatively easy to remove. It's not super easy, but it's relatively easy.
Yeah, part of our concerning
it's worth pointing out that we use those same pumps though too.
If they're graphite vein, you're throwing carbon off of them.
Exactly. So for you to clean it and then me to get it dirty again is a lot of effort.
You should have a filter out. If you care about particles and you run a rotary vein pump, graphite with graphite veins, you should have a filter right after it.
Passive all day, baby. Here's a question for Brad. And Jim, maybe you can answer this too. There's a lot of concern with like different kinds of like chemical rubbers, plasticizers, elastomers that are kind of getting deteriorated and at some point maybe even dissolving and making it into that stream. How common is that of a problem? And I mean, there's so many different ones. Like just to name a few, and I mean, like I don't know if any of these are actually like real problems specifically for butane, but this acrylonitrile butadiene rubber, NBR. There's chloroprene or neoprene rubber, CR. There's chlorinated polyethylene, CPE. There's chlorosulfonated polyethylene, CSM. There's epichlorohydrin rubber, ECO, and the list goes on. There's even some fluorocarbon rubber. So is this something that's like, is this a potential issue?
Hoses, gaskets, O-rings all degrade over time. So sure, you can pick up some solid particulate off of those things. And again, it's solid particulate. It's relatively easy to remove. There's a much bigger problem with the elastomers than particle formation off of elastomers. That's really not the problem with elastomers. The problem with elastomers is stuff leaches out of them. Chemicals come out of them, not particles, not physical pieces of rubber. But you actually have all these chemicals that get leached out of it, and that's a huge part of what is in mystery oil.
What kind of chemicals are we talking about? Phthalates?
Yeah, well, the main there's a bunch of stuff that it can do, but the single biggest contributor in general, because again, mystery oil is not. It depends on. It's not like, oh, it's acrylonitrile, oh, it's benzene. I mean, obviously it's a whole melange of a whole bunch of stuff, and depending on where it was, it could be all sorts of different things. So, but in general, when one speaks of mystery oil, the biggest, maybe not the plural, at least not the majority, but at least the plurality of it is going to be plasticizers. And most plasticizers are phthalates.
Okay.
But there are other plasticizers besides phthalates. And it's not just plasticizers, there's antioxidants and antiozons. There's other things that can be extracted. But the single biggest issue is extraction of plasticizers, and the single biggest plasticizers are phthalates. And phthalates are a problem because they're linked to endocrine disruption. I mean, there's definitely health risks associated with phthalates.
Brad, have you been able to like separate phthalates and identify them in in gas contaminants in the past, or have you seen other contaminants that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we test, like you said, we test for a little bit of everything. Phthalates is not one that has come up as a request, um, but I can definitely look into seeing how we would test for that. Whenever you look at the testing scope, I know you mentioned BTX and oxygenates and sulfurs. Those are the common tests that we run. We can drill down on a compositional level and see benzene down to 1 ppm, right? To make sure it's less than 1 ppm. Mercury, all your metals that might be in the butane stream. We do a heavy residue test that takes a little bit more product, but it actually will record what type of residue is left after boil off. So that's the list of tests go on and on and on.
What's the potential for like trimethyl arsine or something like that to be as a volatile metal to be in our gas? Is that a pretty common thing, or is that not a common thing?
Yeah, I agree with Jim on this one. It's not very common at all. The typical butane stream, it may have some metals in it, but it's not going to be very high, I don't think. Your typical butane will have a little bit of propane, iso and normal. It may have some olefins in it, but it also has pentanes, right? C5s, isopentane, neopentane, normpentane. And so whenever I'm listening to the extraction and everything like that, so whenever you heat this product up and you're now taking it to a vapor phase, so those heavier components may be falling out. And I know we talk about water in butane, that's pretty normal, right? That's just butane carries water. When you look at the typical spec for butane, for water, it's a no free water, whereas propane, it may be less than 10 ppm, right? So there's a big difference between the two different products there.
Brad, you do have standardized tests for volatile metals and LPG,
Yes.
right? So there must be a reason for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It be a standardized test because it's not in there.
No, I'm sure a lot of these things are tested for, like BTEX is tested for, but that benzene is slipping through and it's potentiating an issue down the line where, it could be totally fine in whatever stream of spec gas or not that's coming through. But is that enough to just ruin what we're doing at the end user level? That's the question. I think that there's nuance obviously there, but to me, as you stated earlier, Matt, as an operator, I'm like certain that we want zero of any variables that we can't account for in the process, because then we can't determine what the issues are. And so, coming together on this discussion kind of before we get other, one sec, Matt.
Sure, I'm sorry.
We're just coming together to get the information. There she is. Coming together on this info to get it out to the public to say, hey, look, like there are these potential points of contact with these contaminants, but there are tests, and kind of giving a little bit of just a little bit of information basically could help save somebody a lot of time and effort. But mostly it boils down to just getting the right gas supplier, making sure that you're doing your due diligence with that gas supplier. And I think that's kind of what it is. It's a lot of it's on the operator. As we evolve, everything's going to improve, but it's on the operator. So each individual out there that's listening to this, it's up to you to make sure that you have checked all of your sources and you've made sure you mitigated any kind of potential risk that you're going to have. So I appreciate this so much. I'm sorry, Murphy, you come in at the end just to hang out. No, I'm kidding. It's great to see you. I definitely think that there's more to this discussion, but we are going to, like I said earlier, there is going to be a part two. Part two, we're going to hopefully have some results from the contaminants that we sent to Mr. Hicks, and he will be able to speak, eloquently about what those results are. Before we kind of wrap this up, though, I want to give everybody a chance to, speak here and to pose maybe a question to our audience, or maybe a statement to carry into the next one, the next panel we have. So Murphy, since you're here now, let's hear from you first. What have you have to say to wrap this up?
I mean, the first thing I want to say is like, I'm glad that we're all talking. It's a big deal. And none of these problems are new to oil and gas or to cannabis. But what is new is a collaborative effort to discuss them honestly. So, that is step one, and we are in it right now. And, step two is to work with what we have. And so, as it's been brought up a few times, there are standards that exist that are being complied with. The tanks that are being used for those carbon steel cylinders are DOT cylinders. Someone is complying with a standard somewhere. And so it does put the burden on us as extractors, especially since we're the ones who decided to start using fuel as a, solvent for a product that is in between food and pharmaceuticals in terms of application and regulation. So we have a responsibility that is unique to us, but I don't think it's unique to any other new industry. And so it is a responsibility that we earned and, should take seriously. But I think there's a huge opportunity being missed by everyone involved in the supply chain when they don't validate their relationships, their inputs, their products. And a lot of that starts with testing. You can't bring in a new batch of cannabis unless it was tested for potency because somebody somewhere decided that was important. Similarly, we know that we have a minimum 99.5% purity standard. But with the gas, we don't ask for a COA to prove that. And we could. The touch points were brought up very first on this call, and we never got back to them. But y'all, everybody is touching your gas. So many points of touch, so many pumps have been up in there. And we don't ask for COAs, in part because when we get them, they're detached. They're from a manufacturer, not a supplier, not a distributor. So while you might not be able to afford or you might not have access to a per cylinder COA, if you just start collecting the information, you'll find discrepancies faster. And that, I think, is the key. Like, all data is good data, but more data is better. And so it starts with a big fat folder full of a COA to go with every tank. If you don't actually write down the batch number and have a digital file in your Google Drive of that COA, you are not doing enough to deserve to complain. And so while on one hand, you deserve clean gas, on the other hand, you do have a responsibility to check.
Great point. Great point.
I don't know if you deserve clean gas if all you care about is your operating expense, right? Because you're saying, I want dirty gas, I want the cheapest gas in the world. You don't deserve clean gas, right? If that's all you care about, that's what you get.
There's levels, Matt. Don't simplify. Don't oversimplify the problem. There's levels to that. But no, that's true. You gotta do you have to do your part as an operator. No one's gonna just do everything for you, especially at this stage. So, definitely heed the direction, heed the words, people. Kyle, what about you?
I think the future, the way I kind of see it, and the way I kind of see operators in the space right now is you have two kinds of end users. You have guys that are singularly focused on extraction, and you have what I call single source processor on us. And I think just from what I've seen, a lot of the large extraction focused companies are already taking the initiative and controlling their inputs, right? Applying filters and using medias as well to kind of prevent contamination and impurities. Whereas a lot of the single source operators, they're operating at a much smaller scale in terms of extraction. And those guys are going to be more likely wanting to pay upfront for a quality product that has the added COA for every tank and is willing to go that extra step. Whereas the extraction guys are their bottom dollar and fixes that they can still be in the market that's very volatile and changing every year, right? So I kind of see it on both sides. The need to improve the standard and always constantly looking at ways that we can improve our supply, remove that use successful. But at the same time, for all the end users out there, especially if you're an extraction house, all you do is extraction, I would say that it's the competitors of others, of some of the bigger in the internet now. They can buy the cheapest gas possible, not really care about looking at a COA and validate in-house, right? So that's pretty much all
We appreciate that. You were lagging just a little bit with your audio, but I think we all got the point. And of course, for our audience listening, if you have any questions for myself or any of our esteemed panelists, excuse me, I'm coughing on Murphy's smoke here. I'm getting like contact high. If anybody has any questions for us, you can hit it into the live chat now, and we will ask your questions to the panelists. If not, please hold those questions. You could reach out to us on Instagram or, however, and we can address those questions. I just wanted to just give that little tidbit in case any of our audience had any questions for us. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate that. Matt, go ahead. Give us your kind of final thoughts here until the second discussion.
Until the second one, I was trying to think about because I guess what I got interested in or kind of keen on was what question do I want to ask the audience or the extraction community to set up the next meeting, right? So thinking about that specifically, I guess what I would love to know, and I think this gets into a lot of what Murphy was saying too. What I would like to know, so extraction you need to have quality manufacturing system. You need to have total quality management. Again, it's the data, it's statistical process control. This is what, pharma does, right? This is what chemical plants do. This is what extractors need to do because they're basically pharma plants and chemical plants, right? In one of the roles, I think that's great. We talk specifically about, the hydrocarbon solvents and the problems associated with it and mystery oil and all that sort of stuff. But if you look at the whole process, kind of what you're talking about here is if you can control the butane and you get it so that that's quality and you lower the variability of it and you have a C of A. So even if there's going to be some acetone, there's going to be some other things in there perhaps, but it's always going to be below 20 ppm or whatever, you get this consistent supply, right? And that consistent supply lowers your availability. It's all part of total quality management, and and there's big advantages. This goes back to making cars and the Japanese cars from why they started to dominate in the 80s is total quality management. So long digression, get to the point where what I don't know is how, if you look at all the things you need to do to have a quality extraction process, what level of importance is having quality butane? Is that a nice to have, or is that if you look at all the quality issues and all the variability issues, you have 10 things. Where's butane on that list? Is it really high or not? Or how does it affect again, how does it rate with the other things? I would like to know that.
Great question. Thank you so much. We love hearing from you and all of your experience. Brad, please give us some final thoughts here, and you have the biggest job of them all until our next one. We're all looking at you for the answers here.
Yeah, really no final thoughts for me. I just want to say thank you for letting me join in on the discussion. This is all very interesting to me. Way different than what I deal with on a daily basis. But I enjoyed it. We'll be in touch about the testing, no promises, but we are going to give it our best shot and hope to have something for part 2.
We're so stoked to be communicating with you. We're honored that you're even entertaining this and humoring us. It's all about getting better in the name of science. So we're very appreciative, and we can't thank you enough. Mr. Jim, I want to hear from you, my friend, since we know you are in my hometown, my home state, and where a bunch of our other people are located right now. So, Jim, we appreciate you coming in. I just want to give a little background. Jim reached out to me on the Terp Genie IG and kind of gave us some information. Told us that he was participating in the ASTM board, and he's also proposing some standards that they will finalize on the board. So more information there. But that's Jim, guys. And Jim, give us some final thoughts.
Well, you're giving me a lot of credit. There's a whole group working together to put those standards together, and we're doing a good job. At least it gives us a starting point. And
that yes, Murphy's in that group. This fine young lady right here is in that board, and she's actually she's tasked with trying to find some answers here as well. So in of course in true scientific nature, we are here to find out. But if you don't know Murphy, Jim, now you do, and she's going to be a big help to you in the future.
It was Murphy that mentioned trying to compare this to the pharma industry or any other industry that requires on very high purity, consistent SPC qualified material, be it semiconductor, aerospace. And the biggest difference between that and the extraction industry is there is no backstream responsibility for anything. The gas is supposedly tested, I'm sure it's tested, at the production facility. And the very next thing that absolutely gets tested is the output from an extractor. And between here and there, there's a lot of things going on. And that's what's tough to pinpoint, tough to pin down. The last time there was a big benzene eruption out in California, it was in most of the gas in California, be it from distributor A, B, C, or D. And what do? Who do they turn to? What's the end user to do? And we've got to start asking and forcing answers to that out into the forefront. If somebody gets a bad cylinder of gas from our company, should we be responsible to cover the cost of product that was ruined through that?
It's a great question.
Maybe that's a good idea. Right now, the only one taking the heat for that and losing the money, the hard money, is the extractor. And replacing a cylinder of butane for them doesn't help one bit. And the extractor isn't losing the $400 worth of weed that they poured the butane over. They're losing $35,000 worth of output.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. That was amazing. Thank you for saying that, because that's definitely on my mind all the time. And I know many of our other panelists as well, and probably most of our audience. And that's exactly why it's important to have these conversations, because otherwise we're, as the operator, it's the shit rolls downhill and we're standing there holding the bag every day. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate everyone's effort here. Tyler, I'm gonna wrap up with you, my friend, since, you know, like I said, we're always there holding the bag, and I'm surprised you're not at work right now. But I want to hear, you know, what's your expectations, Tyler, as you've been doing this for years, and we know that now it's reached critical mass where we're still seeing problems. So, you know, concluding this, you know, process, what do you want to see at the end of this? What's the kind of the pot of gold for you at the end of the rainbow?
Personally, I would like to see solvent suppliers, like we were talking about, provide authentic and accurate COAs along with each tank, so that we're able to do the keeping of records and stuff like Murphy was talking about. And mainly, if not finding a solution to like removing at the source, finding a way to help extractors learn to remove it at their facilities, so that there is somewhat of a solution to people who truly want to being able to run clean and high purity gas. You're muted, Simon.
Darn it, I said something funny. I said that hopefully someone else figures that out for us. I can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it. So let's hope that problem fixes itself so that we don't have to continue fixing it. But ultimately, right now it's on every one of us. It's definitely on the operators to make sure, but hopefully there's some solutions, and hopefully we can come together and create some standards that'll actually be effective and will hold some people accountable and make sure that we can all keep doing what we love to do, which is work with this amazing plant that has changed all of our lives for the better. So thank you so much. I will, take a look to see if anyone has posed any questions here in our chats. We definitely have some viewers on Instagram. We love all of you guys for watching. It doesn't look like there's any questions, so we will wrap this up right now, and we will reconvene this conversation with some results from our contaminants that we submitted for analytical testing, which Mr. Brad Hicks will disseminate that information hopefully in a couple weeks. More soon on the date and time for that. But guys, thank you so much for joining. We're from everyone here at Terp Genie, we are just in love with our community. We cannot express this one point that we must do our best to keep everyone accountable and to raise the bar and to raise the standard. So keep watching, keep tuning into Terp Genie, and keep watching all of our esteemed panelists as they try to, fix our industry and make sure that we all have clean solvents to use. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. Peace till next time.
Thank you.